Welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. Our headlines this week. Number one, the Trump administration closed the Department of Justice's investigation into Phoenix Police Department, taking the possibility of federal oversight off the table. That investigation, launched under President Biden, claimed to find patterns of civil rights violations. Now, everyone's wondering if a federal judge will eventually end the federal oversight he ordered for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office almost 15 years ago, something that's cost county taxpayers more than $350 million. Headline number two, a three-judge panel of the U.S. Court of International Trade, which I didn't even know existed until we had Chris Mays on the podcast. They heard arguments this week in a case brought by Arizona and 11 other states. The state's attorneys general, including Chris Mays, asked the court to strike down President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on imports, saying he has exceeded his authority. And headline number three, House Republicans stayed up all night to pass a multi-trillion-dollar tax break package, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Speaker Mike Johnson defied skeptics by unifying his ranks with a little muscle from one President Donald Trump and some last-minute concessions. Will passage of this big, beautiful bill, though, lead to some big honking deficits? And that brings us to our guest this week on the AZ Political Podcast, making his third appearance. I think we're only a year and a half old, so you're right up there.
That's great.
This is former Congressman Matt Salmon.
Do I get like a free tea bag or something like that?
Yeah, we'll get you a T-shirt or a bumper sticker or something, I think, yeah. Of course, Mr. Salmon did two stints in Congress, one in the mid-'90s, one in the 2010s, right. And that added up to, 5 terms, right?
Yeah, 10 years.
Mm-hmm. In between those two stints, Mr. Salmon barely lost the race to Democrat Janet Napolitano in 2002 to be governor. His most recent run for office was another gubernatorial run in 2020, which you told me, Matt, would be your final run for anything.
Right.
Okay. Even state mine inspector?
I don't want to be state mine inspector.
It means you have to go in mines, right? Who wants to do that? All right. So were you sad or were you glad to see members of the Freedom Caucus, which you helped to found, give in and vote for this 1,100-page bill? And did anybody read it before they voted for it?
Well, I can guarantee you if they read it, they scanned it. I'm not sure they understood everything that was in there. There were 2 Republicans that ended up voting against the bill. One of them is a really dear friend of mine, Thomas Massey. In fact, when I had Broomhead show a while back, he was one of my guests. Mm-hmm. He graduated from MIT, smart dude, and also very, very principled. And he voted against it because it continued Biden-level spending. That's what he said. And I think, as well as same issue with me, is what it does to the deficit. It increases the federal debt by some $4 trillion over the next 10 years, and it doesn't make sense to me.
I think that adds up when you add the $4 trillion. That's 6 kajillion, right? Is that what the deficit? The debt's at now?
Right now it's at 36 trillion. I think at the end of 10 years it'll be over 50 trillion.
Wow. Whatever its chances in the Senate. I know you served in the House, and I know the Senate looks down on the House.
Well, if they do the same thing that they did in the Senate, basically Trump brought in the recalcitrants, people that weren't willing to vote for it, and scared the what out of them. Said that he was going to basically get a primary opponent to run against them if they didn't vote for it. And most of those people just want to be in office. So principle kind of ranks a little bit lower than personal gratification of being in office.
And you and I talked about this. I don't know if it was the first time or the second time you were on the podcast. How you were in Congress the last time we had a balanced budget, the last time we didn't add to the U.S. debt in the mid-'90s.
We actually balanced it 3 years in a row.
Wow.
And when I left Congress, we had a $150 billion surplus. Not a deficit, a surplus.
Yeah.
But
we were carrying debt. We just weren't adding
to it.
No,
we were still carrying the debt. That's right. But we had started paying down the debt.
Mm-hmm.
And then President Bush was elected, by a hanging Chad, and he started deficit spending again. It was really frustrating to me because we worked hard to get that budget in balance, and it's not brain surgery. It can be done. And the programs that eat up the most money are the entitlement spending, which would be Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then debt service, the interest on the debt.
Which they are cutting Medicaid in this, and they're actually adding. There's a means test. You have to be, if you're an able-bodied person, you're going to have to do some work.
And I think that's good.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the reasons that we were able to balance the budget back in the 90s was that we put the same work requirements on for both Medicaid and for SNAP. It wasn't called SNAP then, but it was
food stamps,
basically the food stamp program. But we put work requirements on there, and the rolls were cut by half over the next couple of years, and people went from being on welfare into jobs, and they didn't need welfare anymore. And so I very much support work requirements. I think that's actually a good component.
Yeah, and while Medicaid is a big part of the problem when it comes to deficit spending, it's really not even close to the largest part of this. A lot of the spending, of course, goes to the defense budget.
Right. But the biggest 75% of the federal budget is offline. It's on autopilot. Those are the things and they don't. Congress doesn't even mess with that. It's on autopilot. And those items, those 4 items, take up 75% of the federal budget.
75%. So, is there any hope for our future? Like I've always joked, our great grandkids are going to be paying this off. Then I started saying, well, my great grandkids will finally get this paid off. But it doesn't appear that that's ever going to happen.
I mean, my frustration is that DOGE, was out there all over the place saying we're gonna cut $1.5 trillion. Isn't that what they said at the beginning of the year? And after all the smoke cleared, it ended up being about $150 billion.
Yeah.
A far cry from what they promised, 10% of what they promised.
Yeah.
And so all blow and no show.
But part of it is there's a lot of pushback from not just the left, but the middle. People love these programs. Everybody hates a government program unless it benefits them, right?
Ronald Reagan said the closest thing we're going to see in this life to eternal life is a government program.
Right.
They just go on forever.
Yeah.
And many of them need to be changed, altered, closed. Some programs need more support, more resources, more money, and some of them have outgrown their usefulness, but they just keep going on and on. And I'll give you a crazy example.
Yeah.
But when I first went to Congress in 1995, every morning and every afternoon, we would get these big ice buckets delivered to every member of Congress's door. And come to find out that it was back from the turn of the 19th century when they had ice boxes instead of electric refrigerators.
Oh my gosh.
And it went on for decades and decades and decades without any kind of oversight. So and they also had elevator operators. Like the members of Congress can't push their own buttons.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
No, they're usually pushing our buttons. That's the problem. Yeah.
And pulling our chains.
Yeah.
But the fact is, there is so much waste that goes on at the federal level, and I'm a big fan of local control. Putting the power back to the states.
So is that one of the policies that you approve of that Donald Trump is trying to implement? Maybe doing away with the Department of Education?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Department of Education wasn't even created until 1979,
right?
During Jimmy Carter's presidency, and the fact is, those decisions for a kid's education should be made at the local level, and then you don't waste all that money. I would block grant all the dollars that go to the federal Department of Education back to the states and let them put it into the schools, raise teacher salaries, do a better job taking care of what's going on at home.
What's interesting is, so Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education, but then it was Ronald Reagan who brought it to a cabinet level position,
right,
and made the Secretary of Education, part of his board of directors, if you will. So, where do we find that sweet spot of bipartisanship and fiscal conservatism? Because I think in some ways what Donald Trump has done has hit on so many different levels. People are like, yeah, I like him for this, but I don't like him for that. And yet it doesn't really, nothing gets really slashed from the government. So
it's a lot of talk.
Okay.
And that's my frustration, is that there's a lot of talk and promises of cutting spending later. And I'm sure that's, how they got a lot of the members to vote for it, saying, well, I know we didn't cut the funding. DOJ promised $1.5 trillion in cuts. We only got to $150 billion, but there's going to be out year cuts. And you know what? Those kinds of promises of future cuts in spending are worth nothing.
And we didn't see them in this bill,
no,
right?
We did not see them in this bill. No. In fact, that's why my good friend Thomas Massie voted against it, because it continues spending at Biden-level spending.
I asked Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst, earlier this week on Arizona's Morning News. I said, any possibility that, 2 more pieces of alliteration will be added to this and it'll be the big, beautiful balance, budget balancing bill? Not a possibility. Will we? I'm going to come back to this because it's something we've been talking about for forever, and it seems like we're going to be talking about it forever. Are we ever going to get a solution to this? I mean, Moody's downgrading the United States government's credit.
It's scary.
Only by one notch, but they've done it before.
But when they downgrade, we have the threat of paying higher interest rates. And if we pay higher interest rates, I mean, we're sunk. We've got to get a handle on this. And the amount of debt that we have it's incomprehensible. When you're thinking about $35 trillion, and that does not include what we owe Social Security and Medicare recipients. That's not included in that debt. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of work to do.
It's a mangling of a quote from someone else, and I can't even remember who it was. It might have been Grover Norquist, but the saying was basically the difference between Democrats and Republicans are, the Democrats come in and they say, we need 100,000 pillars to hold up the sky. And everybody's like, that's insane. And then the Republicans say, no, that's crazy. It only takes 90,000 pillars to hold up the sky.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where we are?
And yes, very much so. And, I'm still a big proponent of term limits, and that includes for the president. I'd say, President Trump, follow the Constitution. 2 terms, you're done. But I'm a big believer in term limits for members of Congress and senators, because I think that if you don't go into it viewing it as some kind of a career, and you understand that I'm only here for a time certain, I got to make my mark. And, I think you're less worried about your longevity and more worried about getting the job done.
Let's talk about people who didn't stick around Congress very long. One person, actually 2 people, they did stick around one part of Congress for a while, but I wanted to mention because these other 2 people, because we're always told about how mavericky Arizona is, right? John McCain probably being the best example. But are the days of a Republican or a Democrat representing Arizona who works well with people across the aisle gone forever? And is the fact that Jeff Flake and Kyrsten Sinema, who, by the way, was your guest when you did the Mike Broomhead show,
right?
The fact that they were one-term U.S. senators, a sign of that?
Look, I think both of them, and if you were able to talk with them, they'd probably give you a whole host of different reasons, why it didn't work out. But the party, the Republican Party, has morphed into something that is unrecognizable to those of us that, have been around for a long time. A lot of the policies that are being pushed by President Trump sound like they would have come out of Walter Mondale's mouth. Seriously. Yeah. He's now, bought into the idea it's okay to tax the rich, put price caps. He's floated that idea when Walmart, had to raise their prices because of the tariffs.
They should just absorb the cost of the tariffs.
Price caps, that's socialism. It is. Who is his advisor? Is it Bernie Sanders? Come on.
Which, by the way, a Republican president by the name of Nixon kind of did something similar.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. And he also is the guy that started the EPA.
That's true. That is true.
So, ultimately, both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, I don't think they're any semblance of what they used to be. And I'll give you the example, like on the Democrat Party, when I first went to Congress in the 90s, a very influential subset of the Democrat Party was the Blue Dog Democrats. Mm-hmm. They don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, the more moderate, pro-business, pro-gun Democrats, they don't even exist anymore.
Do the Blue Dog Republicans even exist anymore? Maybe the exception of Thomas Massey.
If you don't buy into the mantra, that's being pushed from the party leaders, then you just don't fit. And Kirsten did a good job. I mean, if it wasn't for her, the filibuster would have been gone. Mm-hmm. And we would have been screwed during the Biden administration, the Green New Deal. But when I say that about the Green New Deal, with all the power that Congress has yielded up to President Trump, think about when a Democrat's president. They'll be assuming that same power because the precedent's been set. You could have a President Newsom that could basically go in and enact the Green New Deal without even going through Congress, just through an executive order, because that's the way things are going right now. You got to be careful what you wish for, because if you wish for a king, you're going to be stuck with a king for a long time.
Does the Trump style of republicanism go away when Donald Trump leaves office?
I think that's a big who knows.
And is it depend on if J.D. Vance
that's the point. Is J.D. going to take it to the next level? Because it's not really conservative politics anymore. It's populism. It's basically, what are the 80-20 issues out there in America right now? And I'm going to buy into them, whatever they are. Doesn't matter if it's a liberal or a conservative idea. That's what I'm going to push.
And is this one of the reasons you won't even run for mine inspector?
Something, I don't know that there's really a place for people that actually believe in something anymore. It's everybody drinks the Kool-Aid and you do what you're told. And that's the way things are right now. And if Donald Trump wakes up one day and says, well, now I think that we ought to be a socialist country, then all the Republicans start singing that song. I didn't sign up for that.
Maybe the A in AZ Political Podcast should stand for antidepressant, because that's what I feel like I need after talking to you, Matt Salmon.
I wish I had something different to say, but, I just think both parties are, they're not what they used to be.
Yeah.
And mavericks, people that actually go fight for their constituents over, what they're told to fight for by, whoever in their party, they're few and far between anymore.
All right. Well, do you have any offspring that's interested in running for office? If you're not,
I had a daughter that actually served on the school board, and she had a gutful.
That soured her already.
Yeah. She's now teaching kindergarten. Actually, she just got an offer. She's going to teach freshmen in high school that she graduated from.
Oh, wow.
And she'll start doing that next school year. But, no, my kids, I don't think any of them are interested in doing that. Look, when the American people wake up and decide that we actually need to get back to having platforms within the parties, mm-hmm. and not just be advocating the whims of whoever is our president at the time. People need to go with their own set of values and ideals and fight for their constituents, and not be simple agents of doing what they're told.
All right. Well, we'll leave it with hope as opposed to depression.
We can hope.
Okay. All right.
Hope springs eternal.
I like that. All right. That is former Congressman Matt Salmon joining us here on the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharpe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you real soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharpe. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.